Welcome back to the Culture and Code podcast. I'm your host, Rayfield Johnson Jr., and with me is my guest speaker.
Co-host Nina Aurora Rowland. Today's episode is inspired by a quote from Iron Fist. Nothing ends without a new beginning. I mean, that's deep on so many levels. Am I right?
It's deep. I would definitely say that. And what I'll also say, it fits perfectly with our topic today. So, our topic is patience and mentorship. Sharing knowledge and bringing up the next generation is a focus for today's topic. So, the most rewarding part of my career, and it's been a while, my career in consulting has been the opportunity to learn from mentors and also be a mentor within our team. So, not only being able to mold the next level, but also having my own career, my own growth molded by a lot better leaders that I encountered over the years.
Yeah, better leaders. I agree with that. Mentorship isn't just about giving advice. It's about planting seeds and waiting for them to grow. And sometimes that waiting part, it requires a lot of patience.
No, I agree, completely agree. The hardest thing for you to hear is that you have to wait. When you're growing in your career, growing to your next level, hearing someone tell you that you're just there, you're at the cusp of it, but this is what you need to do, that's when you need to seek out the mentorship instead of getting upset about someone saying, hey, it's going to take a while, just have patience. I think mentorship helps to bridge that gap so you're not focused on where you're not at and you realize where you can get to.
Yeah,
So
totally.
I guess when we move into our first segment here, why does mentorship matter, right? So, Nina, from your years of experience in tech consulting, see, that's a compliment because I know you've been working in this space for a long time. Why do you think that mentorship is such a big deal?
As it's the ultimate ripple effect, right? When you mentor someone, you're shaping the future, as you said, of your team, your company, and even your industry sometimes. It's like kind of like passing the torch, but with a little bit of fun sprinkled into it. You know, I started my career with a mentor in my very first interview, so to speak. And without that mentorship, I know I wouldn't be right here today talking with you
Yeah,
on this podcast,
as
Culture
my
and
guest,
Code podcast.
as my
Hashtag
guest speaker, I appreciate you doing that as my guest speaker. No,
as your co-host.
in all seriousness, though, I do believe that mentorship in general is about, like you said, passing the torch, having a little fun sprinkled, throughout it. But I believe having fun is essential to career growth and development, right?
Yeah.
So with growth comes the opportunity to create new beginnings. And I think some people fail to realize that mentorship is about creating new beginnings. So it's not about just hearing what someone has to say. It's about realizing what your next steps are and how you get to those new beginnings. You're helping someone step into their next chapter. And another thing I would say about mentorship, it doesn't mean that your next chapter is outside of your current organization. It could be within the organization. It could be branching out to build upon your own career and where you are. And it could be just staying where you're at, but mentoring other people, right? You're starting a new chapter that you weren't at previously. So I guess my prompt to the listeners, because we have done this in every podcast, and there's not an audience, but there are listeners. Um, who's the person that gave you the first big break? Drop their name in the comments and tell us what they taught you, right? So from a, hey, this is where I was at, this is where I'm at now, how the growth happened. That would be great for us to hear and see in the comments. So use the hashtag Culture and Code podcast when you do drop the comments. So does that sound good, Nina? Did I do good at the audience prompt that time?
You did.
Okay. Awesome.
Congratulations.
I
Okay,
appreciate I
so
appreciate you
let's
being patient. So,
speaking of patience, let's talk about it. Why is it so hard, Rayfield?
um, why is it so hard to be patient? I think I kind of mentioned it earlier. We're looking at instant gratification for ourselves. We're also constantly looking at our peers and where they're at. We're looking at people that may have graduated with us and they have this title, and we're looking at, hey, where our title is. But also within the same organization, I think we're looking at responsibility.
Yeah.
So sometimes we're looking at why don't we have the responsibility this other person has, and then we're comparing ourselves around that. So it's more, again, instant gratification. We're looking at our own careers and saying, hey, I want results yesterday. Um, Understanding that mentorship is like I do this all the time, like a slow cooker, right? So I put lunch or dinner upstairs while I'm working, and then I go upstairs and finally get it later on in the evening. I understand that it takes a while to cook those things, right? The
Mhm.
same thing with your career. Your career should not be cooked in the first 2 years of your career. That would be a pretty fast and boring career. You didn't get an opportunity to grow. You didn't get an opportunity to practice and to teach other
Yeah.
people, right?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And sometimes you'll explain something and think they didn't get it. But then months later, they nail it and you realize your words stuck with them. And I see this in parenting our kids also, right? We'll lecture, teach, conversate, whatever on topics. And we get the classic eye roll that almost all parents are used to, especially when you got teenagers and above. And then months later, the same concepts, you hear them sharing it with their friends or their peers. So that's affirmation that the seeds were planted, and the individual just had to nurture it and grow that seed to make it their own.
Completely agree. Completely
Yeah.
agree. Yeah, a lot of times when we are in a mentorship relationship, we may not realize what plants we're, or sorry, seeds we're planting, not plants we're seeding, what seeds we're planting, until later on, right? So I'll give you a quick story because I have had the opportunity to mentor a few people. Um, One of the most recent mentors, um, I realized that I was encouraging her quite a bit to seek out the next level when it came to our promotion process,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
The main reasons because there were things that I saw that she did not see. And at the same time, there were things that she was highlighting that I said, hey, that's probably on the same highlights as your peer. The
Yeah.
realization is there, right? So I was planting a seed about what standing out versus fitting in. And that's a problem, right? A lot of times in our careers, we really want to say, hey, we're doing the exact same thing the other person is, and I've seen you pat that person on the head. Why am I not getting the, the head
Yeah.
pat, you know? But I think when she realized what I was calling out, it was easy for her to kind of say, hey, this is exactly what I'm doing different. And what she did do different wasn't within the organization. It was outside of the organization.
Yeah.
The extra items that were building up to this is how my career, where my life is going, versus just the mundane, hey, this is a conversation about the things I've done to date. So it
Yeah.
was a great transition. And I will say that by planting the seeds in that person, they also planted seeds in me about the ability for me to go out there and venture out because truthfully, that person does above and beyond. I won't say their name just because of the podcast. I don't want to get copyright infringement or whatever. Anyway, I don't want to expose that person, but it did give me the courage to say, hey, I'm going to start putting my name out there a bit more, travel a bit more, speak at more, events,
Yeah.
that kind of thing, because they were doing so much that I'm like, I kind of think I'm wasting time. And that's years and years into my career, right? So,
Yeah.
um, you know, it's what I learned, patience is part of that process. She really did understand that after all the conversations, it wasn't about that instant, hey, this is what I did. I did the same thing that John and Michael did. Instead, focusing on what she did, I almost said her name. That's crazy. Focusing on what she did was more important. So I guess I think that's what I have. What do you
Yeah.
have, Amy?
No, the beauty of that is mentorship, just to encapsulate that in a short summary, mentorship is a bidirectional relationship, right? It's
Yes,
not one-way mentorship. It truly is both ways. And we learn from our mentees just as much as they learn from us.
I agree with you. So I guess my next thing is another audience prompt. You know, I've given my example. Have you ever had that full circle mentorship moment? This is to our audience, not to you, Nina. Don't answer that.
Mm.
If you have, we would love to hear about it, read about it in the comments. Again, if you can share it with the Culture and Code podcast, hashtag, that'd be helpful again for us to do our searches and kind of read through the comments. And if you have other comments is great as well, but this is more particular to the mentorship moment. Share it. All right. Let's
All
put you in
right.
a new segment. I'm kicking off every segment. I know you were
No,
hoping to
no,
kick off
I'm
one.
kicking this one off.
I'm kicking.
So let's get practical. How can mentors stay patient and effective? Because patience is the hardest part.
Yep, I agree with you. Patience was the hardest part, but that was previous segment. Now we're talking about practical tips. So for those tips, coming from me, I think in my career, the things that have helped me the most, obvious, I keep bringing it up, don't compare yourself against other people. But
Yeah.
another way of saying that is set realistic expectations, right? As you're growing in your career, I think we say by year three we want to be XYZ. And that's because we saw someone else's trajectory go to XYZ, right? Um, it might not be realistic that that's what we're gonna go, right? There's a pathway to everything, and there's a divergence on that pathway. There's a good chance that we might have to go into one of those divergent paths to get to an even better place than the other person. So you shouldn't set your expectations based on other people. And then celebrate small wins. I think you know this, Nina. One of the things I do love is watches. So whenever I do something, I acknowledge that progress by either exposure from a history perspective, like buying a book about watches, or I do purchase, a watch, right? And it's not expensive watches by any means. It's like something that I saw, come up on a news feed or something like that, and I was like, oh, that's cool, right? Something
Yeah.
that's unique, right? So I get a opportunity to celebrate in those instances, right? Just acknowledging that, hey, you have done something.
Mhm.
Um, I listen more than I talk is a thing I hope I can do. No. But in all seriousness, like when I'm mentoring people, I gave the example of the young lady. I listen a lot on that conversation. All right. It's not about just talking. If it was, then I think it'd be one way. And I don't think she would have listened to any of my advice because you're talking at someone as opposed
Yeah.
to actively listening and talking with someone. Sounds like another podcast we had, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, listen more than you talk is very important. And then being real and sharing your failures. Um, that's something that people do not do. I have a good example of I had someone I was working with, another person I was mentoring, who confessed to me that they had not planned on taking any more certification exams. And it was funny because they were confessing that to their mentor, who from my career have loved taking certification exams and have even created competitions about it. Um, but the reason was because they didn't like that they had failed the one or two times. I think it was two times within one cert. And I had to explain to them that I actually failed one cert five times and then quit taking that cert. And if anyone remembers, this is back in the days, the MCSA from a Microsoft certification path. There was one for SQL admin that I just could not get. And I was just like, nope, I'm done. I've given enough effort to this. But I had to share that failure. And it did make them go back and take other exams. And actually that person went on to taking Databricks exams, taking more Snowflake exams. It's probably one of the better exam takers that we had at the company. But they really were like, I'm done. I'm not taking any more. I failed two times, right? But I shared my failures. So again, those four tips I have was set realistic expectations, celebrate the small wins with things that you like, listen more than you talk, and then share your failures.
Yeah, just one thing about the set realistic expectations, everyone has to take move on their time clock, right? Because people have lives outside of work, right? So what's happening in your personal life can impact your timeline. Um, myself, right? I'm a mom of three kids, right? Wife. So my
Really?
timeline
I've
has,
never heard that. I've never heard that you're a mom of three kids. Tell me more.
whatever. So my timeline has been very different from someone who maybe doesn't have kids or doesn't have a family. It's just them, they themselves by themselves. So And that's okay, right? There's other priorities. So that setting the realistic expectations is really important and assessing the timeline realistically as well, right? So that's just one thing I wanted to add to that point. But that last one, sharing your failures. I mean, vulnerability builds trust. It really does, right? And here's the bonus about that. Ask questions instead of giving answers. I like to share my own vulnerabilities or things that I could have done differently, right? As a way of one, building the trust and opening up the conversation so people can really start that self-reflection process. Because sometimes you need a prompt to push you to self-reflect. Because when it's like, we have these conversations all the time. Why didn't I get promoted? Why didn't I get promoted? Why didn't I get promoted? But it's really hard to pause from the commenting about it and self-reflecting, taking the time to self-reflect and, point out what is going to be my differentiator. I think once I started doing that for me personally, it started, moving me in a different direction that was more desirable to me. You know what I'm saying? Is that self-reflection. Okay. So, and also, when you ask questions instead of giving the answers, it helps your mentees think critically. Again, opening them up for self-reflection. I think that's a really important step in furthering your career or, relationships outside of career as well. So for the audience, which tip will you try first? Please let us know in the comments using the hashtag culture and code podcast. We'd love to hear which tips are the most helpful to people. For me, it's the sharing failures and setting expectations that are more realistic.
Yeah, just a reminder of the four tips. It was set realistic expectations, which Nina just mentioned. She's a great guest speaker. Celebrate small wins.
Co-host.
Listen. See, listen. See, that's the thing. You cut it off. Third tip was listen more than you talk, Nina. And the fourth one is share your failures. So again, whatever tip you think you'll try first, please leave in the comments. Hashtag culture and code podcast.
Like I said already.
Yeah, I know, man. All
Yeah.
right, so let's move on to a different segment. Legacy mindset. From a legacy mindset, as a mentor, you got to think about what you're putting out into the atmosphere, what you're putting out in the world, and not about just the words you're putting out there, because the words are they may last with someone, but they're not going to be the lasting part of what you said or the lasting part of the conversation. The actual actions of the person is going to be that lasting legacy, right? So, how does mentorship tie back to our initial quote, which was nothing ends without a new beginning?
Well, when you mentor, you're creating beginnings for others, essentially, right? Even for yourself as your own chapter evolves. And it is about leaving that legacy. It's not just about a job title. Especially when you're stepping into leadership, it's even more important. What are you doing to create the next group of leaders, right? That's what a leader does. A leader doesn't just lead and then go off and retire. A leader creates leaders. And that's your legacy. That's what you're going to be remembered by when you retire or move on to the next chapter, whatever that might be.
Yeah. You have any examples of that, Nina, from your career?
From my career, yeah, me personally, I've been in practice leadership for several years now, and I've been mentoring a couple of folks to, take on that same career path as well. But it became very clear to me that if I didn't move into a different role of a different nature, that there wouldn't be room for them to start exercising those muscles. So that's what I did. So I moved into a pre-sales role, which I'm doing now and absolutely love because it's stretching new muscles for me as well, right? But Meanwhile, my mentee was given the opportunity to be my successor, and they're making the role their own and killing it, right? Doing a fantastic job. And when you don't make that space for the next generation to start exercising those muscles, it creates frustration and that builds up over time because they're learning from you for a reason because they want to start putting into action everything they're learning, but you got to make that space for them.
No, I agree with you. I completely agree with you. It's the beauty of it, right? When you're able to mentor people or a person, um, and what you leave behind isn't just the words, right? It's the
Yeah.
legacy that they will carry on with them.
Yeah.
And it's a trickle down effect. Right? You'll see, someone years later who has the same mentality but didn't realize it came from three different mentors before that.
Yeah.
That's something that's beautiful. That's beautiful to see. Your impact outlives your role in that mentorship capacity, right?
Yeah.
And I've been very, very fortunate to have great mentors in my career, and definitely this is probably more of a serious moment of this podcast because I will bring up that one of my mentors recently passed away,
Mm.
um, and I think a lot of the persona that people see that when we work together and the fun amount of time I have, those things came from that mentor. Prior to that, I had a very, very serious persona. And this mentor, uh, really expressed that it was okay to kind of be yourself, right? Your geeky self. The mentor's name was Jim Carroll.
Mhm.
And I didn't know if I wanted to bring it up in the podcast because I didn't want to get emotional. But one of the things we shared in common and in love was our love for Batman and data.
Ah.
So the mixture of that and the ability for him to tell the most amazing stories that captured whatever audience he was in. He always came out as the smartest person in the audience. It was something I looked up to. So I did take him on as a mentor very early on in my career. Mentorship turned into friendship,
Mm.
and obviously friendship turned into admiration of the person that he was. So, again, I think the legacy. So anybody who encounters me, encounters my jokes, encounters the seriousness when it's right to be serious, and then the admiration for data, solving business problems, those came from my relationship with Jim Carroll. And he recently passed away. So it's still raw for a lot of us who knew him. Very, very, very close person, close friend. And that's probably the most serious you're ever going to see me on this podcast. But I do think about how um, the way he approached consulting is the reason why I stayed in consulting for so long.
Mm.
It's not always rainbows and butterflies, right? But you have to create the world that you're in, right? You have to create the fun that you're having. And I think he was very, very instrumental in me realizing that not real and not saying, hey, everything has to be serious. Uh,
Yeah.
and I think our clients and our teammates have benefited from that mindset because when things become hairy, become serious, remembering that you're a person, um, and a person is not perfect, has their flaws, has their quirks, is important so you can
Mhm.
get through your career, so you can make it to a 19-year career within
Yeah.
consulting when you thought you would be gone in 3 years. So
That's a beautiful tribute and very powerful lessons learned, right, from that relationship. And thank God for Jim Carroll because you would have been intolerable.
no, completely. No, I do appreciate that mentor, and I know
Yeah.
he's been such an impact to other people. So I hope that I hope anyone listening that knew Jim has a fond memory of him. You don't have to put that in the hashtag. Just take a moment and think
Yeah.
about the mentorship and the mentors that have been in your life.
All right. Well, that's a great way to take us into our closing.
Yeah. Sorry about the serious moment there, Nina.
Oh,
And
it's
those
beautiful.
who are listening. Um, but yeah, the most important thing is always be Batman. That's if you take anything from my tribute to Jim, definitely I say the most important thing is always be Batman when you get a chance. So, um, quick recap, mentorship requires patience. It creates new beginnings. And as I mentioned, and it builds a legacy that does last with the people that you've impacted. So it's very important that you think about the legacy that you're putting out there. Um, don't be an asshole.
No curse words.
No curse
You said a
words.
cuss word.
Don't be an a-hole. There you go. Think about the legacy you're putting out into the world.
Yeah. So practice patience and invest in the next generation. Um, for those of you listening, our audience, please share your mentorship stories with us using hashtag Culture and Code Podcast. We'd love to hear about it. And if there's, if you could take one positive thought and share that with another human being in your life, be it at work or in your personal life, try that for this next week, right? And see if you can bring a smile to someone's face or plant a seed.
100%. Bring smiles to people's faces and plant seeds. It's very important. Again, thanks for tuning in. Sorry for the serious moment. But serious moments are moments that are needed. So again, thanks for tuning in. And until next time, keep mentoring and keep growing. Bye.
Take care.